We're talking about the birds and the bees, the virgin birth of Jesus from the text of Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 through 25. And perhaps it's the most dreaded and awkward conversation between parents and children. The dreaded question that comes up in response, where do babies come from? We've got all kinds of phrases and euphemisms about this conversation precisely because it's got the potential for so much awkwardness. Now, the birds and the bees, or the talk, as some might call it, is of course about human procreation and sexuality, and it's a natural conversation for our kids to ask. So we come to our Bible in Matthew chapter 1, and we ask the question, well, what's the big deal about Jesus' virgin birth? This is something that Christians throughout the ages have confessed and professed as a part of the core identity of their faith. So what exactly is the big deal about Jesus's virgin birth? Well, let's take a dive into the text of Matthew chapter 1, and then we will come up with a couple of points to chat about. So first off, starting in verse 18. Now the birth of Jesus Christ took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. And her husband Joseph, being a just man and unwilling to put her to shame, resolved to divorce her quietly. But as he considered these things, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary as your wife. For that which is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Quote, Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which is to mean God with us. When Joseph woke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took his wife, but knew her not until she had given birth to a son, and he called his name Jesus. So, what's the big deal about Jesus' virgin birth? Well, two big points to take away here. First off, Jesus being born from a virgin meant that Jesus was born without inherent original sin in his life. Now, the reason why I put the added word in here, inherent original sin, is simply because it's the concept of inheriting original sin from a father, from a paternal contributor to a person's biological makeup. Sin is a part of that biological makeup that gets passed down from generation to generation. So Jesus being born without original inherited sin in his life meant that he was perfect, that he was truly blameless from the moment of his conception between Mary and the Holy Spirit. Secondly, it meant that Jesus was born to a living human being, and therefore he also was a living human being. Many various sects and various offshoots of Christianity throughout the ages have maybe held one of these 2 points. Maybe that Jesus was born without original sin, but that he wasn't fully human, that he was only fully God, and therefore this explains why he was without sin. Or others have taught that he was absolutely a living human being, but that he wasn't born without sin. This is widely popular presently in contemporary culture, that if there ever was even a historical person of Jesus, that he was simply another person. He was simply another human being who would have lived and who would have died, but he certainly wasn't divine. He certainly wasn't unique. He was simply another human being like anyone else. And yet, both of these things come together as our Bibles teach us the truth of who Jesus was, that he was born without sin and that he was also human, that both of these things come together, that Jesus in his birth was uniting of the divine with the human together into one person. So Jesus was born without original inherent sin. Romans 3:23, of course, tells us that the general rule for human existence, to be human nowadays, after the fall, after Genesis 3, is that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. This is both by our own actions that we partake in on a daily basis, both in the actions that we choose to take in, the actions that we choose to avoid or simply don't partake in. and also because of our sinful heritage as fallen humanity. So when the first humans, Adam and Eve, sinned, their sin passed down generationally through parents, specifically through fathers, through a paternal passing on of original sin. So without a human father at the point of conception for Jesus, this meant that he was born without sin, and therefore he began life as a human being with a clean relationship with God the Father. Secondly, Jesus was born to a living human being. Christ's birth wasn't that of an alien or of a foreign entity. His mother didn't cease to be human. Mary didn't all of a sudden become angelic or become divine herself. She was a human. And so therefore, Jesus was also human. Jesus was both very God of very God, and therefore only able to do for humanity what he accomplished through his life, death, and resurrection and atoning work on the cross. He was only able to do because he was divine in scope, but also it was applicable to you and I because he was also human. So Jesus is both of these things. He is both God and man. Just as you and I are human, Jesus was human, and yet just as God the Father has always been God, Jesus Christ as well was always of God. He was both God and man. So Mary's particularities and the particular words that get used in Matthew in this particular text are quite interesting and give us some clues as to how it was that Matthew wanted to point towards Mary's status as a virgin and Jesus, therefore, status as being born of a virgin. So the first verb used to display Mary's status as a virgin is pronounced sunerkomi. You can murder me down in the comments below for my mispronunciation and for my terrible Greek. I barely passed any kind of Greek courses that I took in seminary, precisely because I had terrible pronunciation and terrible memorization, actually. So I guess all of those things counted against me. But anyway, that's another story. So this word is used in Matthew 1:18 to describe that Mary and Joseph were betrothed but had not yet specifically, quote, come together. In other words, they have not participated in actually bringing the marriage into a secure status through intercourse or through any sort of sexual activity whatsoever. So this specific verb is used to describe conjugal coupling between a man and a woman. So this first verb being used means that Joseph and Mary haven't engaged in this conjugal coupling. So Mary is without being with a man up until this point, up until Matthew 1:18. But it's again used, there's another verb that's used, a second verb that is used pronounced parthenos in Greek, and that's used in verse 23 of chapter 1 to describe the status of a young woman of marriageable standing, having not previously engaged in intercourse with a man. So, in other words, these two verbs hang like two wonderful arguments or two sides of an argument. If you wanted to say, well, Mary probably had intercourse with Joseph because maybe they had intercourse before they had officially yet been married. Well, the first verb, sunerkomi, seems to point no, that would not be consistent, at least with the testimony that we have from Matthew 1:18. And then the second verb combats the other side of the coin, or the other side of the argument, that, well, maybe Mary had intercourse with someone else. That maybe Mary wasn't a virgin not because of her activities with Joseph, but because of her activities with someone else. Well, the second verb seems to point to that not being the case either, that Mary was truly a virgin, that she had been with no one prior to her particular conception by the Holy Spirit with the person of Jesus Christ. So Christians cannot claim their faith if there's only just a simple, acknowledgement that Jesus is just God. If he's not man, then he hasn't done anything for you or I. If he's not human, he hasn't done anything for us humans. And conversely, if he's not God, if he's just another man, then we've got to challenge everything that's being claimed in the Gospels and in the Bible. So the virgin birth really comes as the linchpin, as the fulcrum, as a center point for much of the Christian faith. Therefore, Jesus' virgin birth is actually really, really good news for us as Christians. It means that Jesus himself was divine, that he was also human, but that he did not inherit original sin, And therefore, he was eligible, capable, and also willing to submit to God the Father, to live a perfect life on your and my behalf, to die the death that you and I deserve, and to rise again as the first fruits of the new creation. That this Jesus, because of his virgin perfect birth, was someone who was able, who was willing, and who was capable, who was eligible to accomplish so much on behalf of his people. And this is really good news. And so this lesson on the virgin birth really confronts us starkly and puts us in a bold moment where you have to choose right from the get-go of the beginning of Matthew's gospel. You either have to choose whether or not you're going to believe that Jesus was either a bastard born of human immorality, or he was the God-man born to atone for human immorality and attain for his people perfect immortality in eternity.